All right, welcome everybody. It is April 27th. This is our 12th time meeting. Quick recap from our last meeting. We discussed the survey to Pomelo grant participants to get the gauge of dropping Mac support for Mandel. I can give a quick update there. We talked about now we were up to 4 engineers on the ENF, and there's work in progress on a process to prioritize the scope for 3.1 and what's going to be moved into 3.2. We're made progress on the survey to node operators. So we've got what I'd say we're probably pretty well final draft at this point. We had a bit of feedback come through in the last call. I think what we've got now is pretty well ready to send out to the EOS support contacts. We had a quick check-in on testing on Jungle. I know Michael said that they're getting started on testing. We can get an update a little bit later on that. Any other agenda items to discuss today?
Bucky has made some progress on the Docker containers for everything, except he needs a Mac Mini to test with. He's on the call. He can maybe, when we get to that section, give an update.
Great. That is the platform support was the first item we had discussed last. So yeah, why don't we start there?
Yeah, sure. So the
cool.
The current state of that is everything's working under Linux, Windows 10 and 11, and Mac OS ARM M1. So the only thing I don't have is an x86-64 to basically go in and make sure everything still works, and then also make the documentation for what that would look like. And currently what this is it's effectively a program that kind of straddles over Docker, Node-EOS, and CLEOS to kind of abstract over most of that. So from a developer standpoint, it should be a really nice tool for them to be able to use, and honestly, better than anything that we've had before. So it should be more of a win than a loss of native binary packages.
Great. And I was, while discussing with my team the survey to gauge the sentiment on dropping Mac support, Denny was telling me that there's, in addition to Docker, there's other options that are becoming more widely chosen by Mac developers. It's like more of a VM type that's easy to run. Anyone familiar with that? And whether that's perhaps an alternative option we should be documenting, or does this Docker solution, is this kind of the more recommended solution we should be documenting? Anyone familiar?
I personally use VMware on Mac and Windows, but it works very well. Of course, that's commercial. Well, unless you're doing open source development, but yeah, that works great. And I'm sure there's other VM
or even like cloud VMs that is running it locally on your laptop. From what I understand, is very resource intensive, and that what Denny was saying is he likes to run it in the cloud on a VM, and then you save your local resources. And
well, but I mean, if you're running it to do smart contracts and you're trying to do that on a Mac, the cloud, that makes the cloud a little, it's not the same solution.
Okay.
If people are using the cloud, the same. I mean, the thing with Docker is that there's a lot there of composing the main object itself, the main image. So it's more than just sort of pulling an image and then setting everything up. There's a lot there with port forwarding. So there's a lot of niceties that you get with having multiple instances running inside this Docker unit, and then effectively kind of switching the porting so that you have different ports coming out. The other big thing I would say is if somebody's using a cloud based VM, then really they can just use the Ubuntu binary packages that we already have, and it's not really a loss of generality at that point.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is generally Docker images take less resources on a machine than a full VM. VMs want you to allocate, disk space and a whole bunch of other stuff, and the Docker container kind of runs inside the already allocated space and everything. So that's why people tend to use Docker. They're light versions of VM. They're not really a light version, but they use less resources.
Yeah, but on a Mac, you still need to simulate the Intel processor. So I think that's the most resource hungry thing on a Mac. But I never used it actually.
Okay.
But
on a Mac, we need to simulate the CPU, right? So that's the main concern of the whole support.
Bucky, were you making it where these were M1 and x86 images for the Mac? So when you dropped them into the Mac, they were running in their native mode. You're not also running, or are you saying with VMs?
So I had to make a couple of different changes. I still need to go back and fix a few different things before I push up the PR. So I had to make some changes to EOS VM to get it to compile properly for ARM, and then a few other things so that basically the VM, the Ubuntu version that we're going to run in the M1 one is ARM. So there shouldn't be any degree of it. The thing is that you don't have the same back end of EOS VM JIT, but if you're for development purposes, it's really not that big of a deal. The main thing here is that it should be for development purposes. If somebody's planning on running a node, definitely they don't want to run it in Docker.
No,
definitely they don't want to run it on EOS VM without JIT. So I would say that there's some degree of figuring out who the main who the main person is that's going to be using this.
Yeah, this is for smart contract developers that want to work on their Mac. Is the whole point of it, of doing this exercise. So Stan, you were basically talking about simulate the M1 chipset if you're talking VMware. So because I can run VMware and run any OS, I can run Windows and run Ubuntu on Windows. I can run Ubuntu and run Windows on Ubuntu. Once I run VMware, I'm simulating the hardware and the operating, and then loading the operating.
I think Saeed mentioned that there is some tool for Mac which allows you to run Docker images in Intel CPU mode.
Yeah, but you can,
CPU.
Right. But what Bucky's doing is he's going to make a Docker image for M1 and a Docker image for x86. So it'll run native on the box in a Docker container.
But how do you make EOS VM run on ARM? We don't have any ARM compatibility with the.
So the interpreter is really minimal changes need to be done to that. The main reason it doesn't build right now on ARM is because we have some inline assembly stuff for x86 that's kind of smattered around in a few places.
Can you skip those assembly?
Yeah.
So the
inline assembly, changed it out for some ARM stuff that needs to be there for one or two of the spots that actually does need to be there. For everything else, we can just kind of if it out for right now, because you're just losing the support for EOS VM JIT for right now. If we decide that we want to support, if ARM becomes a big thing outside of just Mac, right, then we can allocate the resources to
it. Might. I mean, the vendors are building ARM servers, and it is growing. And servers are much cheaper in terms of energy consumption. So it's growing, but I mean, it's not fast enough growing for us to start using it now. Yeah. Maybe in a year or two.
That wasn't the point of this exercise, though. This was just to allow Mac developers to do smart contract work on their Macs by running a Docker container. That was
right. Keeping the existing Mac developers happy by not taking away their ability to keep working the way they work. Awesome. So if I understand correctly, the packages are done. It's been tested on M1. You need an Intel Mac to do the testing for the Intel Mac, and there's some work to be doing to do all the documentation.
Yep.
Do you have a sense on? I think we were targeting this week. do you have a sense on how much time that would? I guess you need to get your hands on an Intel Mac. Do you have a sense on timing on when the documentation and the testing would be done for this one?
I would assume, it'd be a fairly fast follow after I get the hardware itself. So depending on how long it takes to get that, maybe a week. I'm not entirely sure.
Cool. Let's assume, let's give it 2 weeks for now.
Okay.
What is that? Yeah. And check back in. We'll check back in next week, see how it's going.
Yep.
And this will be great, to bundle with we'll be putting out a nice package for developers, letting them know, hey, this is coming. Here's how you can be prepared. And this can be part of that package. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
In the same topic, we were discussing the sending out a survey. So after discussing the survey with the team, the problem we're trying to solve, the audience that we have in Pomelo, we think that maybe a larger couple options. We're going to be sending a more extensive survey to all Pomelo participants in the coming weeks. Kind of a thanks for participating in Pomelo survey that we can include some of these questions about. Are you a Mac developer, and how do you do your development, and is a Docker image going to be is that going to meet your needs, kind of thing. However, we don't think that we think it's probably pretty of all Pomelo users is a pretty small portion that are actually smart contract developers. We're already on a separate ticket. We're talking about the survey to node operators. Would there be value in having a separate survey kind of as part of this initiative to smart contract developers? Just about Mandel more generally, are there other types of, besides Mac support, are there other things we should be surveying smart contract developers about? And would it make sense to have kind of similar to how we've got the survey that Stan put together for us, which is targeted about specifically a node operator type? Is there something like this that maybe we want to send to all smart contract developers? And we got the EOS support contact list as well. So in addition to all of their exchanges they got contacts for, they've got a large, I think 300 or so contacts in total, including both exchanges and Dapp developers.
But that's not related to Mandel Upgrade. I mean, it's nice to have some opinions from the crowd about tools that they use or problems that they want to be solved, but it's not related to Mandel Upgrade. I mean, we have the whole initiative in one of the ENF streams that targets the developers and development environments and new debugging tools and testing frameworks and so on. So that work is basically a different stream. I mean, here we just upgrade the network. That's what we should care about. Developers doesn't change much. I mean, it's all backwards compatible. All tools will keep working.
Sure, yeah, but so the ENF asked us to gauge, put out a try to gauge what the impact would be of dropping Mac support. There's many different ways we can do that. It doesn't have to be part. Like I said, I don't think this should be part of this survey. I agree with you that this survey is targeted to node operators for Mandel. The question is, does it make sense to have is there value for this group if there were a second survey targeted specifically to smart contract developers? And if so, would there be any other types of questions besides the Mac support questions that we'd want to ask while we have their attention?
Oh, difficult to say. I mean, I've been talking to developers, especially newcomers, right? Those who are like since 4 years in this environment, they don't have any problems. They just know stuff. Mm-hmm. But those who just came in and start digging through the documentation, I had a few interviews with such guys, and basically that's the base of our blue paper for Core Plus. Making such a survey. We didn't focus on Mac, but we focused more on let's say high-level topics that need to be discussed, and most of concerns were about documentation. That you want to do something, you have no idea how, and there's no guideline, no documentation. So for Mac support, I mean, if we provide an alternative to Mac users, they'll be happy to use it. That's
sure.
It doesn't need.
And I guess another question. Yeah, and a question that came from my team as we were, thinking through how might we phrase this question, is, I guess, what would the ENF? What was the ENF's goal with the, like? Is there a threshold that, for example, would make us decide that it's worth prioritizing keeping Mac support, for example, or has the decision already been made that we're dropping Mac support regardless of what the results of this survey are?
No, otherwise that'd be pointless to do the survey. So this decision was made prior to engineers joining the ENF, right? So this group had already decided that they were dropping Mac support with Mandel. And then the issue was re-raised, and we're now attempting to gather more information to see whether or not we may have missed people. Now, the largest database of developers that we have likely is through Pomelo of active developers on EOS. And so that would give a sense as to whether or not they would benefit from that. I can't tell you what the threshold would be, get the data first, but yes, the idea is then we would be open to reopening that question for sure. Otherwise, there's no point to do the survey. But get the data first, and then we can see, and then we can see as a group, because as a group we made that determination. As a group, we would make the determination as to whether or not the threshold is now being met.
Okay. So we'll make sure I think in addition to the Pomelo audience, like I said, I think our team looking at our audience is probably going to be, it's probably minor in terms of the smart contract developers. But let me talk to EOS Support. I don't think is Randall on the call? About, I see him here, but he's on his iPhone. I'm not sure if you can speak, Randall. Maybe you and I can catch up offline about also including your Dapp developers in your list in this survey. We may get
So one of the things I would say is we're now delaying this. The longer we delay this, the likelier that we can actually get the support in time for the release. So right now we're talking about increasing the scope. We've wasted the last 3 weeks not sending out the one question that really we want to ask. So just be cautious not to delay by another 2-3 weeks. Otherwise, even if the answer ends up being yes, we won't have the time to actually make it happen.
Right. Okay, Corvin, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I thought I raised my hand before I just jump in. With all these discussions about Mac support, etc., I wonder what's the status and the future of the EOSIO WEB IDE. It was always the absolutely the easiest entry point for new developers.
That was built by Todd Fleming, and I'm not sure if he ported that over into the Mandel portal. Bucky, do you know anything about that?
I don't believe he did. I haven't seen it anywhere. It's a, it is a really nice tool for people that are just sort of getting started. I think that there was a lot of things there that was still missing and still needed a lot of work to kind of really become a full-blown set of tooling. So if we did want to pull that in, then I think we would have to kind of reevaluate what all we really want to be there. But I think the bigger thing there is who do we want to target coming out of this out of the gate? I definitely think that as we move forward, we'll want to try to support more of the year one developers. But for me, the biggest thing I don't want to make sure that we don't lose is the developers that we currently have. So that's sort of a big focus. But the Web IDE thing, I don't know. I would be interested in terms of the survey to figure out how many people were using the Web IDE in active development, because it always tended to have a fairly high drop off point after you sort of reached any degree of complexity of your system, just because of the difficulty of kind of piping things through and not having the node there to shut down and pull back up.
Bucky, you taught EOSIO intro development at Virginia Tech for a couple of years. And I know that we looked at trying to have that as an option for the students that were first starting. What was the result of that? They ended up not using that, and I think we gave them some hardware, and you worked on the Docker containers. What was for those first intro to EOSIO kind of CS students? What did the path end up being that was optimal from your experience?
The path ended up being mainly native on their computer, because then they could have the files there. They could have Git repos that they cloned in and out of it. I mean, it's not like it's a difficult thing to do within the Web IDE. It's just you have to have documentation. It's also not incredibly clear of how to restart your Web IDE in the same context. So it's sort of a thing of if you leave it long enough, then it'll blow away, and then you lose your development environment. You have to constantly make sure that you're using either a GitHub. Also, the other big issue is just downtime of the Web IDE itself. It was constantly down back then. I don't know if that's changed over time.
We are using it on a daily basis, and it works
Still
great.
Good. Okay.
I can only report for my team, but some specific features like working on different branches, you spin up your workspace, you spin up a new chain, deploy your contracts. Some front-end developer can directly communicate with the Web IDE and whatever, interact with it. You can share the workspaces. You don't have to host multiple testnets with different smart contract states and stuff like that. That makes it a lot easier for us, at least. And it's super simple for people that are not used to work on Linux and terminals and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's something that's not dependent on Mandel having Mac support, but it would be dependent on Mandel supporting like updating to support this IDE. Or I'm guessing there would be some work there.
There is. It's basically updating the. I mean, I don't really know what all we want to do there, so I'd have to kind of come back to you. So, what do we want to target in terms of the different components that are in it? I think there's still some open questions as to what we're still going to continue to support moving into the future.
We'll just need an owner, right? Needs some team which feels responsible for it.
Yeah, it needs more than an owner, though. Like there's decisions as to what is the de facto tool chain, what is the scope of the project, and that kind of thing. Because at the beginning of this, it was just literally let's just use Gitpod and get a thing that works in Gitpod, and then we kind of stop there. So it's if it's the support that it's really just a Docker image upgrade, right? Just we need to have packages and releases for Mandel. Then once we have that, we can have a binary package that comes off of Mandel that we build the Docker image, because it's all based on Docker anyway, right? It's just everything in the world's Docker at this point. So that's the main thing, is that you update that image to effectively pull the Mandel binaries, and then you're pretty much good to go. I don't think that anything has changed in terms of. I have to make sure that nothing's changed in terms of how you start up nodes and all that. I mean, I will ask maybe one thing, if we do go down the route of keeping this, and the things that I've done in terms of the Docker stuff, and I think it would be applicable to this, is how many people are starting a node and just starting sort of a blank node, right? Like there's a lot of, there's a tremendous amount of boilerplate that goes into pulling up a node with all of the protocol features enabled, everything that you would sort of need to be on a development environment. I think that would be a mirroring of EOS itself. And I know that we don't have any support like that within WEB IDE at all. I've tried to build that in to some degree into the Docker thing that I'm doing now, but me is how far down the rabbit hole does the WEB IDE need to go? I think is a question there.
And so it sounds like there's a couple, like we want to get like who's the Mac developer versus Linux versus Windows, and of the Mac developers, how many are using WEB IDE? And I guess this is more than we want to gauge more broadly than just Mac developers. It would be useful to understand how many people in general are using WEB IDE. Does this make sense? What development platform then versus environment? Are these categorized correctly?
Yeah.
And then what are there any other environments that would be possible, like native?
Yeah, purely native is currently the way I think. Well, I mean, it's the way that we did in-house at Block One, and I think a lot of people do sort of totally native in terms of Linux or even Mac.
Yeah,
it's not an option on Windows.
And then like Cloud VM, would that be another one that possibly,
that's just native, but on a cloud versus your own personal hardware?
I mean, I think it would still be interesting to get as a development environment, because then it can kind of guide us of, okay, the developers typically use Windows for their main boxes, but they're SSHing into cloud VMs. They can still give us a good degree of what people are doing with their sort of things that they are used to. So if everybody's using Windows and they're all having to go through a cloud VM, then I'm not saying we support Windows, but I'm saying that might guide a future direction there.
Cool.
WSL is also a nice option. I think it's not widely used, but Windows Linux subsystem. Subsystem for
that's another
Linux.
Environment, WSL.
It's just Ubuntu native on Windows. So Windows now ships with an Ubuntu shell native in it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think it's not only Ubuntu, but yeah, basically that's
there's a lot of different repos or distros you can pull down into that, but it's just a subsystem for Linux. Basically, it redirects syscalls and does some emulation under the hood. But it's a pretty nice system, especially with the. So, well, and one thing there is WSL1 was pretty flaky in terms of supporting Node-EOS, because the way that it handled emulation of files and really was terrible. But WSL2, I think, is pretty good in terms of supporting Node-EOS and everything that we kind of had. I don't think I've ran into any problems with that.
Okay, cool. And what we might be able to also do is, for those who select purely native Mac, we have a third follow-up question around, will you be able to do with a Docker instead, or something like that?
Yeah.
Would a Docker be an acceptable alternative?
Well, not necessarily is Docker an acceptable alternative. So the way they have that set up is that you don't interact with any of the Docker stuff yourself. There's an abstraction layer there. So basically it blankets over all of the Docker stuff. And you use it in the exact same way that you would Node-EOS or Kleos, from the general command line. If you have files that are local, you don't have to worry about how you pipe those through to Docker or create volumes and all that. You don't have to worry about how you do the port forwarding through the thing. So there's sort of the thing there of it's Docker, but it's sort of Docker behind the scenes. So I don't know if we want to necessarily say, are you guys good with just moving to Docker? Because it is a fairly big headache.
Or would you stop developing if you lost native support? Maybe more the question we want to, or
yeah, I don't know. It's still not like the thing is it's trying to emulate native, right? Like that's the whole sort of point of this thing is trying to emulate native on their machine. So I don't want to make it. I don't want to label anything that would make it sound like we're just going to sort of stop supporting Mac.
Yeah, the Docker image will be a Mac Docker image. That's the key difference between running on a VM and running on a, in a Docker image. The Docker image has to match the host OS.
No. So the Docker image on Mac is Ubuntu.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Even on a Mac.
Windows is using Ubuntu. Mac is using Ubuntu. Everything behind the scenes is using Ubuntu. The thing I had to do for ARM is because we're going to use ARM Ubuntu on M1, so we don't have to run through problems with performance being atrocious at that point.
Part of the problem with asking a question like, would you continue to still do development if we remove native support and had Docker support? Part of the problem with a question like that is like you're asking somebody who's already doing development. It doesn't really capture the additional friction you're adding to new developers who are trying to come into the ecosystem and then, have to jump through a bunch of hoops to even get started.
right. Okay.
Yeah. And
is there another?
Like in terms of the jumping through hoops thing, I think that's I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I wish I have everything done in terms of the Docker thing so you could see it. There's less hoops for developers to jump through with this, even considering just regular native. Like it abstracts over certain concepts like nodes. So you can name them and pop them around and export and then import. And it does a lot of things that it just sort of naturally developers have wanted to do for a long time, which is boilerplate and shell scripts that kind of go along with, quickly making accounts and not worrying about, okay, do a create key and then do a Cleos command. There's a lot of sort of aggregate stuff in there that should make things a lot nicer. So as I'm saying is that to some degree for Mac developers, there is not going to be, I suspect, not a huge pushback because it's just a better environment all around.
It's actually a better experience.
Plus, we now have Windows support, which is something that we've never really supported at all. And once again, it works perfectly in Linux. So to me, it's a nice general solution that kind of solves across all the boundaries so that there's consistency in terms of how you use the system. I think that's another area that we've kind of struggled at is, how much value is it in having a consistent environment across all these different systems?
Right. Okay. That's super helpful. Thank you, guys. So yeah, we'll work on getting this into it. There's some work on this question I got to do. I'll run it by you all to see if it makes sense. And I think even just these questions alone are going to help get a lot of insight. Great. Anyone have anything to add? Beauty. Anything new to report on? Maybe Ted, you want to share progress on the process to establish or the prioritizing the items for 3.1 and 3.2?
So yesterday we had a meeting where Matt pulled a list of about 2,500 pull requests, about 2,350, 2,400 of those apply to things that are potentially that got done post when Dan snapped the repo and pulled it across. And the question is, which of those will be included? Right now, we're trying to be very stingy and only take very few We'll likely hold another meeting, and it might be good if we invited you to that meeting as well, Daniel, where we'll review some items that are. So I've made a project, a 3.1 release project in the EOS Network Foundation organization that has all of the pull requests or issues that were marked 3.1 candidates or 3.1 approved. And right now there's 2 3.1 approved, log splitting, and then an inflation bucket PR. So those 2 PRs have been approved by Yves. The other ones we need to kind of talk about, they are candidates, and the people that kind of mark them as candidates, we should kind of get them together. I'll need to pull together a meeting of the engineers plus Stan plus maybe Matthew Darwin and Kevin Hefner, and look through those and decide, do any of those really need to go in, or were they kind of nice to have? But so far, that's how the process is working. We have a bunch of pull requests that live across the 11 repos. Only some of those have been marked as kind of candidates. And then now that we have a list of about 9 candidates, we need to go through those and determine. Right now, the 2 that are approved have been assigned. Matt owns 1, Arig owns 1. And the rest at this point are just candidates that we need to kind of go through. Other than that, we have 3.1 pretty much finalized in terms of feature frozen, unless some of those candidates are approved to come in. And then again, anything that is found in those lists from Kevin Hefner, from Matt Witherspoon, and there's also kind of a nice list from Stan. Stan's and Kevin's list are linked off of the wiki page under the Mandel repo. Matt's list is still kind of too much in flux, so we've just, people that would like to see it, we can share a link to it, but it's kind of open permission, so we don't want people, random people from the internet changing it at this point. And so that list is possibly has some things that we will see that we need to pull in as well. But it's, the clock is ticking, so very few things going into 2.1 now, and starting to form what the process will be for 3.2.
Great.
Your second bullet point, Daniel, I believe should be 8 or 9, not 3.
Oh, sorry.
I believe it's 9.
8 or 9.
9 items are identified as candidates, I believe.
That's about right.
Sure. And is there anything worth linking to here for the public, or
it is public. I think it's public. The repo is public. Let me see if I can pull it up and then shoot you a link in the chat here.
Great.
Kind of moving at warp speed here. I've got it. I think this is it. Hopefully it's not the wrong one.
And this might be useful for those wondering, what are the features that will be in 3.1?
So why don't you click on that and see if it pulls up something you can read. It's in the chat. Anyone can look at it in the chat for the Zoom call. There you go. So you can see the ones marked 3.1 candidate. You can see the ones marked approve.
And it's 7, not 8.
Sorry, that I was guesstimating.
7 candidates. Okay.
Yeah.
And 2 approved.
Yes. And the 7 could increase, and obviously if some of the 7 or the increasing number, some of them could end up being approved. This is at least the project board that I'm trying to track off of, so that as we see them, we're just taking issues or pull requests and then just pulling them into this project under the EOS Network Foundation projects. And it does look like it's, although you're part of the group, I'm not sure if it's completely world readable. It should be. There should be. Anybody on this call can click that link and bring that up.
Yeah. Let me know, anyone on the call, if you click it and you're not able to see it.
Any of them say coma related, be sure to include those.
Anything coma related. Yeah. Have a look. See, make sure you got your,
I didn't see them in there,
in
but
there.
I didn't look too hard. But yeah, those.
Cool.
Just to be clear, you want us to add additional comas, right?
You want more comas?
Yes, please. I seem to have lost my ability to trigger them so frequently. So yes.
You're sleeping too much.
That's true. That's true.
All right. What else? Is there anything else we wanted to check in on? Let me refresh my memory again. Oh, testing on Jungle. Any updates on your side, Michael, there?
No, I mean, other than it's running and seems to be fine, but hadn't had a chance to really beat on Hyperion or whatever yet. So
I do have one question that's related to Jungle 4. I'm not sure, but it's for the EVM. Do we have do we know the BPs that are running on Jungle roughly what the hardware is? I don't recall if Aloha showcases the performance benchmarks for Jungle 4.
I'm sure we can get them to shift it over. You know, I mean, I don't even know if it's live on Jungle 3, but I mean, if they have it, they just need a ship node and a little bit of time to do it. But
no, yeah, so Jungle 3's there. Yeah, Jungle 4 is not there.
I think, and maybe that's somewhat of a, Jungle 3, I know is being asked in the channel, where are the nodes? They're all kind of spinning down. I think even Stan said Jungle's dead. Jungle 3 is dying, but do we want to start, shifting more over blocks? I think, things like that. I think that was another question about explorers and whatnot. We're kind of in this straddle on Jungle, but I don't know, maybe that's not a here conversation question, but it's starting to become apparent that, we're shifting over. As for the hardware, is it really important that the infrastructure on the BP be rock solid? I mean, is that I haven't looked into it.
Yeah, so this is not really for Mandel, but I guess more so for EVM, but kind of relates all together because we moved people over to Jungle 4. Right now, we're basing off the performance that we're seeing on Jungle 4 to give us an idea of what it would look like when it's ported onto the mainnet or when it's deployed on the mainnet. And we're seeing that the majority of the transactions are being processed in roughly 10 milliseconds, but they should be a little bit faster. So we're wondering whether or not it's because the BPs are running lesser hardware, which is likely because it's a test net. But then we'd be able to approximate, give or take, how much performance increase we'd see when we move over the mainnet, because we do know what the mainnet hardware is running generally. And I just pinged the Aloha guys because I'll try to find out if they can add Jungle 4 to the benchmark list. That way we'd actually be able to see. So we wouldn't even need the hardware itself. We'd be able to see what the delta is, percentage-wise, and give us an idea of what we'd see in terms of increase. Because then that translates into what the average cost per transaction will be for the EVM, and then that flows into the tokenomic model, etc. That is important for us. And I was just wondering, because I know some of you are running on Jungle 4 on this call, and Manchester is here as well. How big of a delta it is between your mainnet hardware and your Jungle hardware. Like in your case, Michael, is it roughly the same? Or is
I can give you, if the EOS USA side, they're both running on i9s. I mean, I think Jungle may have a little more, it may have a couple chains testnets on it, but same hardware, same speed. If that helps provide at least one stable. You should look at all those Crypto Lions ones. I think they're all running on the same server. So then once you get that one, you probably have, 2/3 of the VPs.
All right. And anybody else on the call that's running? I guess Nation, do you know if you're running?
Our Jungle is actually on a faster machine than the EOS mainnet. But I mean, right now
when you say faster machine, though, can you give me the actual, like, what are you running on Jungle?
It's this i9-12 series, the newest one.
Okay.
But it doesn't support ECC memory, so it's not recommended for production anyway. It's very fast, but memory support.
It still gives an idea. How about you, Daniel?
I would have to confirm with Matthew, but as far as I know, we're running our regular i9s on Jungle too.
Okay.
Or on Jungle, yeah.
Are their 10th gen i9s? I mean, for the record, CC's is 12th, ours are 10th. I think y'all's have 9th, right? But just if that helps give a bearing, I mean, there are some dramatic differences I'm finding.
Yes, there are some very, very big differences. Cool. All right. I've reached out to Patrick from Aloha, but I see you tagged Nate as well. So we could find out whether or not we could add that on there. Because I'm on the site, and Jungle 3's there, 2's still there, which it's not even running anymore. But
is that even running? Yeah.
We poisoned that
2's
years
been done
ago.
for a while.
We poisoned that years ago.
Right now, we're in a conversation in WAX BP channel. We are hitting the limits of, because those fast CPUs have 128 gig of RAM maximum, and we need more RAM. So basically, we're discussing what will be the next standard hardware platform, and that will be most probably a slower CPU with higher memory support.
Yeah, that's for WAX, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, EOS will hit that, especially if our EVM flourishes and
to be honest, I mean, all the EOSIO chains are going to hit it. It's due to the account creation. So when they start really ramping up a lot of those, and that seems to be the bad, or more efficient use of the memory. Now, I mean, I say that I'm not the developer, and I know the limitations and the way the state works, but I mean, requiring hundreds of gigabytes of RAM, it's getting harder and harder. So anyway, yes, it is a conversation, but we're going to have to start slowing things down just to try to keep things more manageable.
Well, the EOSIO coalition does have scalability plus, so these discussions are occurring as to find out how would we be able to actually scale that.
But EVM itself will increase the RAM consumption because all integers are 256 bits. So whenever you store an integer, you consume 32 bytes for it, right? So and then EOSIO memory management is on top of that as an overhead. So we will increase the RAM consumption on EOS as soon as EVM starts production. As soon as anything big starts deployment on EVM, we will see the memory increase. So we will hit this 128 gig limit sooner or later, maybe in a year on EOS. If everything goes
anyways, a discussion for another day. I was just looking at the paragraph for Jungle 4, seeing as we had people running nodes on Jungle 4 right now.
But basically, whatever decisions we make on architectural recommendations on WAX, you just look at WAX as EOS in a year. So everything that we see now on WAX, we'll see that on EOS. So it's a good exercise also, and we just reuse this knowledge.
Yeah. Cool. That was everything I had for the agenda today. Any other items anyone had to discuss today? All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Excellent.
See you, Ron.
You too. Thank you.